Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Flock Friday here on Chase's Sports News. I am your host, Chase Coburn, and today I am joined by a very special guest, the host of Locked On Ravens and editor for Ravens Wire on USA Today. No better to have on than Kevin Oestreicher. Kevin, welcome to the show.
I appreciate being here. I'm happy I could kick things off here with you. And look, this might be a lull period in the offseason, but certainly not for the Ravens, as they made arguably the biggest splash in the last handful of months here with Jaire Alexander.
Absolutely. We're obviously going to get into that. For those of you who are obviously, everyone here is going to be new to the series. Flock Friday, whenever we are going to talk about the Ravens, it is going to be on Friday. We're going to do a lot during the season as well, but just talking about some great Baltimore Ravens content. And if you guys are a Baltimore Ravens fan, there's no better place to be than Chase's Sports News on Friday. So we're really excited for it. Thank you guys so much. Kevin, it's great to have you on for the first episode. No one better to have on. You are the expert on Baltimore Ravens football. I know we had you on last season where the conversation was, is Derrick Henry going to fit in? He sure did fit in, but once again, when you get deja vu, is Baltimore coming short in the postseason, but they've made some moves this offseason that maybe could change that this coming January. Let's start off. It's the elephant in the room, but in the best way possible. Jaire Alexander is a Baltimore Raven. Everything kind of developed so quickly. Tuesday, Lamar Jackson says, "Hey, Eric, go get my college teammate." He went and got him, and all of a sudden, Jaire Alexander is a Baltimore Raven. So, given his injury history, how much value do you really think Jaire Alexander will add to this defense?
I think it's a lot of value Jaire can bring to the table here, especially because of the deal that he ended up getting. It's not this $20 million per year deal. It's 1 year, $4 million worth up to $6 million. Getting a guy that I still believe is a top 10 cornerback in the league when healthy. That's the big thing, obviously. It's when healthy. I think it's a great deal for the Ravens, and I think that he can have an impact. We know the Ravens historically have liked having three corners on the outside and those rotations of really quality players. You can go back to Marlon Humphrey, Jimmy Smith, and Brandon Carr. You can plug Marcus Peters into that as well, with Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, and Marlon Humphrey. But I feel like we're going to see the Ravens play a lot more big nickel this year. Marlon Humphrey, we know, can play in the slot. They like putting Kyle Hamilton down there as well. Baltimore likes physical corners, physical secondary members. And while Jaire used to be one of the best run defenders in the league, he suffered a shoulder injury back in 2021 to where he's not quite in that conversation anymore, but still a really good run defender. And so I think that with Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith when PQ was still in Baltimore, they played a lot more base defense, particularly because PQ was so good next to Roquan and you wanted to have those guys on the field together. But last year we saw Trenton Simpson didn't really work out. They were trying to put together this team of like Billy Harrison will play some. You got Chris Board, Christian Welch. And now to me, I think that you have the ability. You don't have to be married to having two inside linebackers on the field. You can replace a Trenton Simpson with a Jaire on the field. And I think that for as much as the Ravens faithful and people who cover this team and Ravens fans talk about freeing up Kyle Hamilton, I think what this Jaire Alexander move does is it frees up Marlon Humphrey to move him and him be a chess piece all around the defense, because you now have a more quarterbacks to throw the ball. Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Jaire Alexander, you signed Chidobe Awuzie as well. Oh, and not to mention you have Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks on the back end. That's 5 former first-round picks in your secondary, and I think that while they didn't need Jaire Alexander to win a Super Bowl, certainly doesn't hurt to have him on your team.
It's literally some people are calling it low risk. I think there's no really risk involved. It's $4 million up to 6, which hopefully it is 6 because the incentive is all based on how many games he does play. But I think you're right. It just gives Baltimore a ton more flexibility. And again, if he gets hurt, adding Awuzie, having Nate Wiggins, having Malachi Starks, you already have these versatile defensive assets. You're not so reliant on Alexander. It's a perfect situation for him as well. And I think everyone's looking at, wanting to team up with Lamar Jackson. And that's the reason why he went to Baltimore for less money. But to me, I also think it's a situation where he can prove how great he is without having all of the pressure on him. In a sense, I think it's kind of a great way for him to possibly rebound his career back into that elite level in the secondary. But you mentioned it. When the guy's healthy, he's one of the best defensive backs in football. I think Next Gen Stats was the one to say it. I think he's the 4th since 2018. Only 3 other guys have forced a tight window on more targets on a percentage basis than Jaire Alexander. So he's that type of guy. Again, the injuries are the key question. He's played 16 of just a possible 34 games over the past 2 years. He missed 13 games in 2021, but in those 2020 and 2022 seasons, he was an all-pro. So I'm really excited to see where he fits in this Baltimore defense.
I am too. And I think that for Jaire, I honestly go back to when we were having conversations, at least I was on my show, about Chidobe Awuzie and kind of why he chose to sign with the Ravens. I think, in Jaire's case, Lamar was a big factor, but I agree, Chase, where Chidobe Awuzie signed with the Ravens because he got cut by Tennessee. Tennessee's still paying him, and he wanted the opportunity to come to a competitor, come to a contender, and try to win a Super Bowl. And if he has a great year in 2025, well, he can parlay that into a bigger deal. And I think it's the same conversation with Jaire Alexander. Now, if Jaire has a great year, it's probably a lot less likely Baltimore is able to retain his services without some cap maneuvering because of how many other extension candidates and guys they have to figure out who's going to be back and who's not going to be back next season. But we know that this team is Super Bowl or bust this year. This, to me, puts the Ravens in the top upper echelon of contenders, and they were kind of already in that for me already. But now you have this secondary, and I think the Ravens saw what happened in the first half of 2024. Them struggling in the secondary, pieces that were supposed to contribute falling off, like we saw Marcus Williams really struggle. Eddie Jackson couldn't really contribute anything, and I know that's the safety spot compared to corner, but in the secondary, I think Baltimore saw that and saw the turnaround they had in 2024, that second half of the season, and said, we want to make sure we have that full year of great defense. We don't want to have to scramble around to try to find that perfect combination. Luckily for them, they were able to find it, but it was essentially their last effort that they ended up hitting all the right buttons and having that right combination. So I think Jaire fits a lot of what Baltimore wants to do. It'll help keep guys fresh as well. I think for a lot of these Ravens acquisitions this offseason, like Alexander Awuzie, DeAndre Hopkins, guys who have struggled with injuries over the last few years, not having them being relied upon to be the face of their position group. Jaire's not coming in to be the face of the Ravens cornerback room. You have other really high quality guys next to him that can allow him to get some rest on the sideline, to keep his snap count down to the point where, hey, maybe you don't play him as much during a game, which feels so weird to me to say for a top 10 corner, but you still have the opportunity to keep him healthy, much like you do with a lot of your other offseason acquisitions, and play these guys in particular roles. I think that's going to be good for him.
You mentioned the defensive turnaround last year. Before we move on to kind of a different area of this Baltimore team, I want to touch on this. I think there has to be an element of a new defensive coordinator that obviously affected things. Kyle Hamilton started off slow. Roquan Smith started off slow. Nnamdi Madubuike started off slow. Those were all pros the year before and still elite football players. There clearly was a component that Zach Orr was a new defensive coordinator, and he clearly had some growing pains there. And you could see his inexperience in the first half of the season. We saw this exact same thing with Mike Macdonald in the first part of 2022. With Baltimore's defensive improvements in the offseason, plus the way they played in the second half last year, I could very well this time next year see Zach Orr in a Mike Macdonald position where he could possibly be up for a head coaching job, and looking back on next season and saying that Baltimore was one of, if not the best defense in the NFL, like we saw in 2023 in Macdonald's second year as coordinator, because I think that's so important for this team as a whole. And you add in a guy like Jaire Alexander. I mean, PFF said it best: when he's healthy, they think he has an argument to be one of, if not the best cornerback in the National Football League. So fingers crossed there about the health, and he could truly make this defense, again, one of the most dominant in the National Football League. But we're talking about veterans. What can they bring to the table? No one better to talk about in terms of what veterans can bring to the table than DeAndre Hopkins, who I feel like a lot of people forget is on the team. I feel like the signing happened and then it just kind of fell apart. I mean, it kind of just was forgotten in a sense because this team has so many playmakers. I mean, where does D-Hop even fit in this offense at his age?
I think, to me, again, you're not relying on him to be the prime Texans D-Hop that he once was, because he is not that. But I do think that he was weirdly utilized in Kansas City, probably honestly underutilized. And to me, D-Hop is someone who has struggled with injuries. I think only one of the last 4 years has he been healthy. He struggled with an injury last season where he missed a lot of training camp, and early parts of that year he was not healthy. So dating back for DeAndre, when he is healthy, he is still a really, really good player. But again, you're not bringing him in to be the face of your wide receiver room. You have Zay Flowers and you have Rashad Bateman. So being able to manage DeAndre snaps, not like, we were talking about this a couple years ago with Justin Houston when he was like, a bajillion years old. You're not going to do it like Justin Houston, but you don't want to have him playing a full complement of snaps. It's going to be situational for DeAndre, which I think is okay in this offense, because you're obviously going to have multiple tight end sets that you run. Patrick Ricard's going to be on the field. This is not just a spread them out offense, as we know. They're going to be a ground and pound team. That's their identity. But I think when you look at it just player to player, DeAndre is an upgrade over what Nelson Aguilar brought to the table. And Nelson had a great couple of years in Baltimore. 2023 was awesome, kind of fell off a little bit in 2024. But the Ravens have needed that go-getter type of receiver, someone that can go up, catch a contested pass. They haven't necessarily had that, and especially not someone like a DeAndre Hopkins, who we know his hands are steady. He's someone that's going to go and he can bring down a tough ball on 3rd and 7 to move the chains. And you pair him with it's DeAndre Hopkins, Zay Flowers, and Rashad Bateman. Those are your top 3. I think that all of these guys can be 3-level receivers, but I'd use DeAndre more in the short and intermediate game, quick slant route, kind of get him going like that. We know Rashad Bateman and Lamar Jackson have a great deep ball connection. We know Zay and Lamar have the same thing, and you can use those guys that way. So if you have guys like Rashad and Zay clearing out the backside, if you have DeAndre one-on-one, you even want to get spicy and put him in a slot. You can do that if you want to, because I think he can win quickly, which is really good. And the fact that they were able to get him again, it's not like they signed him. I think a lot of people compare him to Odell Beckham Jr. when they brought him in a couple of years ago. Odell was a great veteran presence. He had a couple of big plays, but he was never going to live up to the price tag. It was a $15 million deal worth up to $18 million. And when everybody saw that price tag come across, kind of soured everybody on the move in the first place, because we kind of knew Odell wasn't going to be able to replace that production. Sure. But DeAndre Hopkins coming in on the deal that he came in on, right around $5-ish million, I think is the right move for the Ravens, because you're not breaking the bank for a guy. And I honestly think DeAndre has the potential to be better than Odell if he can stay healthy. Yes. But I'd expect him kind of in that Odell role. You're not going to play him all the time, but when he comes in, he's going to make a couple big plays for you and honestly maybe change a game with a momentum play.
DeAndre Hopkins can still add value in so many different areas. I think once a player is no longer in their prime, the easy thing for fans to say is wash. But this is a guy who in 2023 was a 1,000-yard receiver, a guy who got 7 touchdowns. And yes, last year, he was injured for part of the year, but I mean, he was probably Kansas City's second option once he joined that team midseason. And so I think that this is still a guy who could go up, and on a one-on-one ball, there are very little guys that I think I'd rather have on this team to go up and just catch a pass than DeAndre Hopkins on this roster. And I think that you mentioned just what role he's going to play. I mean, there's not even that much pressure involved either, because, again, you mentioned Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, clearly the top 2 receivers on this team. You're going to want to use both Andrews and Likely. You want to use Justice Hill. Obviously, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are going to do their thing. Apparently, Keaton Mitchell's faster than he's ever been. And then Lamar on the ground is going to run the ball at least 130 times again this season, assuming he stays healthy. So eventually, there's only so many plays and so many yards that can be taken. So statistically, like you said with OBJ, you're probably going to look back on the season and probably see DeAndre Hopkins was not that Pro Bowler, huge impact type guy. But I think just his presence, you talked about it kind of on the defensive end with Jaire Alexander. You said how Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton are now kind of these chess pieces. I think that's now the case too. I think you could be more flexible with Likely, because he's kind of this receiver type tight end in the sense. I think you could be more creative with the way that Andrews is used in different blocking situations. I think Todd Monken could have a lot of fun using these different pieces in this offense, because I still think that Bateman is, you mentioned that great deep threat for Lamar Jackson. That worked so well last season. But even D-Hop could be used in that way as well. If he gets a quick first step, I mean, he's off to the races. He's still that dominant receiver on a one-on-one grab. So I'm really excited to see what happens. And I just think that for the price tag, I think it was $6 million. You're just getting another versatile asset to confuse defenses. Already you have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. If you could add another element to confuse defenses, it's worth the $6 million, in my opinion. So honestly, where does DeAndre Hopkins fit in? That's kind of the question. I don't know. I think we'll have to see what happens. I definitely know he'll fit in to some capacity, but I think Todd Monken will definitely be very creative with how he utilizes D-Hop.
Yeah, I'm excited. Todd Monken in year 3, I think he's continued to evolve every single year. And the best thing about Todd Monken, and this goes back to his days at Georgia and Tampa, Cleveland, he adapts to his personnel. If you have great run personnel, he will use that to his advantage. If you have a great passing team and those guys, that's your strength, he'll do that as well. And for Baltimore, the great part of it is both of those are strengths. They're obviously a run-first team, and that's what they're going to continue to be. But we have seen the evolution of that pass game since Greg Roman departed, and that was the goal with bringing in Todd Monken, someone with creative concepts who can utilize all of his players. I remember we were having a conversation. I was having this a couple of years ago when Monken came in about, man, does Patrick Ricard even have a role on the team anymore because of Todd Monken, what he did at Georgia, all this stuff. And Ricard is still a big part of what they do. So there will be a role for DeAndre. There's going to be a role for all of these guys. And I'm excited to see it because I think for Monken, he's gotten some head coach interest over the last couple of years. And you mentioned with Zach Orr and maybe his ascension a la Mike McDonald. I think that, if this Ravens offense continues to be the best rushing attack in the league, that passing offense continues to develop and they go deep in the playoffs again. I know we've seen this a couple of times here, Philly losing both their coordinators and head coaching spots. And we could maybe see that with Baltimore. And I think that, again, it's being able to adapt to your personnel and the Ravens making clear upgrades across the board is only going to help everybody involved with this team.
Look, I mean, I think we've seen the best two versions of Lamar Jackson these past 2 seasons, especially as a passer, two most accurate versions we've ever seen of Lamar Jackson. So I think Todd Monken has definitely kind of unlocked something in Lamar, and that's why he should have been now back-to-back MVP, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But I also got to give a lot of credit to Eric DeCosta because I feel like this was, a lot of moving pieces these past 2 years. You got to figure out how to sign everyone, and somehow you find a way to get a player who is the number 2 option on a team that made the Super Bowl last year, and then you get one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL when healthy, and you do it for at most $12 million. I mean, he's doing something right. I mean, EDC is really an unbelievable general manager, and I think that's part of why Baltimore is able to be so competitive. Is look at Cincinnati as an example. It's very hard to build a great roster like Eric DeCosta does, and I think that's the reason why Baltimore is so competitive every year. And then you got to give John Harbaugh credit for the great coordinator on both sides of the ball consistently. So look, it's a stable franchise. And I think some Ravens fans, I think a Cleveland Browns fan are like, oh, you can't win in the playoffs, boo-hoo, because this is a franchise that has truly had everything handed to them on a silver platter since its inception.
The big thing about being a great organization is that you are able to make moves like this. There are reports, Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show, literally right before Jaire signed with Baltimore, and was like, oh, the Panthers are interested, and these teams are offering more money. But Lamar is a big reason why Jaire signed, but part of it is, these players talk, these people talk, and you want to go to a place if you're looking for a rebound or somewhere that you can rebound your career and maybe wash away narratives that have been placed upon you. Baltimore's an organization. There are countless examples of this. I mean, everybody thought when Jadeveon Clowney came to Baltimore, he was done. Kyle Van Noy was on his couch. Everyone said, oh, Kyle, this is okay. Come on, Van Noy's not even playing in week 1. And those guys were able to parlay that into bigger deals, that one last or two last deals that you're able to get. And so if you're a team like you mentioned, the Browns or the Bengals, teams that you see consistently going through turmoil, you don't want to go there. You don't want to sign there because you feel like you have a better shot not only to win, but to perform at a higher level. And so, we continuously see, like, I'm sure teams across the league are like, how did Baltimore get this? How did Jaire sign for $4 million, $6 million up with these incentives? And the answer is because they have built up this reputation and they have shown that both on and off the field. They are a place that if you want to come try to win, you don't want to have any drama. You want to just be in a place and have fun playing football and be in a stable place. Baltimore's the place for you to go. So a lot of these organizations don't have the opportunity. The price tag would have been a whole lot higher for other teams that were interested because they don't have the pedigree and the reputation that Baltimore has. So I agree, Chase. I mean, you got to give Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh, even Steve Bisciotti, like all these guys, they deserve a lot of credit because of the organization and the culture and the representation that they've built across the last handful of seasons.
You're right. I mean, and that is why this franchise is in such a great position year after year. However, I don't know if they've ever been in a better position than they are now. Look, we talk about the postseason doubts and this and that. Is this the most talented, forget Lamar Jackson Ravens team, is this the most talented Ravens team we've ever seen? Because personally, I think these past few years, 2023, definitely that was the best team in football, and they found a way to blow it in the playoffs. Last year, I believe they were the best team in the AFC, and it took 3 turnovers and a drop 2-point conversion to lose. I think they were a better team than Buffalo, and it was just unforced errors that eliminated them in the divisional round. We're talking about a team that's already one of the most talented, and then you add DeAndre Hopkins for cheap, and then you add Jaire Alexander for cheap, and we haven't even talked about the fact that they got Mike Green in the second round. I mean, oh my goodness. So, I truly think this is the most talented team in the league, and it's certainly the most talented team we've seen under Lamar. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, they are certainly up there. There are a lot of great Ravens teams, and I have former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail on my show every week, and I got in trouble for not calling the 2000 Ravens defense. I said they were one of the best, and he quickly said, oh, no, they were the best because he was a part of that team, and I might get in trouble with Q if I say anything other than 2000 for that defense, but I agree with you, Chase. They're up there. I think in terms of Lamar Jackson, it's not even close. Right. I think that conversation to me, the 2023 defense was historic. They were able to put up historic numbers in 2024 offensively in that second half defensively. 2019, that roster wasn't as good. They just had a really nice run that year. I think that was the year they took everybody by storm. So to me, I think that in terms of the talent on this roster, you look at the weaknesses to me, there's a little bit of uncertainty at the guard positions, right? You
Yeah.
wonder if Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees, it looks like they're the front runners to win those jobs right now. So are they going to be able to hold up? Obviously, the kicker situation is one to monitor with Tyler Loop and John Hoyland battling it out. And we've heard a little bit about Loop's struggles over the last handful of days and OTAs and minicamp. I chalk that up more to being a rookie, but we'll obviously see if it continues in training camp about a month from now. And then I think the safety spot, but I think that gets eliminated with Jaire being there. I think that it was either safety or Jaire. And I said on my show, I'd take Jaire 10 times out of 10, and here we are. So I think that they trust Bo Braid, they trust Sanusi Kane, but up and down the board, you not only have star power, you have depth, you have underrated contributors. It's not like you have all your stars, and then if one of your stars goes down, Lamar Jackson's the one exception to this. If he goes down, you're in a tough spot. But if one of your stars goes down, you're able to just replace that guy with another really high quality player. And that, to me, it comes down to a lot of the health conversations where sometimes you truly just have to be the healthiest team to win. But the Ravens have put themselves in position here because you have some of the top talent at their positions, and you also have some of the top depth pieces at your positions. So if they win a Super Bowl, I think I would call this the most talented Ravens team ever. At least on paper, they look like one of the most talented Ravens team ever. And I try so hard not to get too caught up and too ahead of myself because I get so excited about it, because the games obviously we know have to be played on paper. But man, this is the most excited I've been about a Ravens roster on paper in a long time.
Honestly, it just makes me smile thinking about this team because I know, again, barring a scary injury, this team's going to be right there again. And look, I think Ravens fans have gotten so annoyed and frankly, maybe unreasonable about the lack of postseason success. I understand you have this generational quarterback. You want to capitalize. You want to win Super Bowls. But this franchise, as we were just talking about, their stability, their pedigree, they're here every year. That's hard to do. You look at franchises who go through runs. Look at Kansas City right now. They're having their time in the spotlight. They waited, 45, 50 years after their first Super Bowl to get there. So, this is a hard thing to do. Baltimore has turned themselves into one of the best franchises in the National Football League. And just thinking about this roster, it just makes me smile because Lamar Jackson's going to be a lot of fun to watch. This is going to be a very, very fun football team to watch next year. And hopefully they have some magic in them come January. But you're 100% right. They've put themselves in a position where, again, Lamar Jackson, an exception to this, one of their guys goes down, they have the depth and they have the versatility to make up for it. And I think, obviously, you don't even want to think this way, but the running back depth, you've seen it before. I mean, Lamar Jackson won MVP with Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards, in respective seasons. So, he knows how to win with other guys in there, and you could go through the different positions and stuff like that. But yeah, this is a great Baltimore team, and hopefully they can finally capitalize and capture that Lombardi Trophy later this year. I don't know. Obviously, it's the first edition of Flock Friday, but it may be already one of my favorites. Kevin Oestreicher, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
I'm honored to be the first guest, Chase. This is going to be awesome. I appreciate you having me.
Let's do it, and maybe we reunite mid-season or something to talk about all this stuff.
I love it,
guys. If you don't for some reason listen to Locked On Ravens, what are you doing? Links to Kevin Oestreicher and his social media and his podcast and all that in the description box below. We appreciate you joining. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the first edition of Flock Friday. Training camp coming up before you know it, and it's going to be really quick until we finally have Baltimore Ravens football, and I'm so excited for it. Kevin, a million thank yous. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Chase. Thanks for having me.
We're going to wrap it up here. Signing off alongside Kevin Oestreicher. I'm your host, Chase Coburn, saying so long from Flock Friday on Chase's Sports News.